My name is Paul Turley. I'm a principal consultant with Pragmatic Works. I've been a business intelligence architect or practitioner or trainer or consultant for roughly the past 18, 20 years or so, kind of depending on what you're counting. But I love BI. I love modeling and manipulating data, and I love visualizing data. Love telling stories with data. Ooh, I was going to start this too. Start with you. We'll put that right there. So we're going to talk about creating custom visuals without any code using a Microsoft research project called Charticulator. And I just find that fun to say. Let's say it together. Charticulator on three. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's the hardest part about this whole session. We're actually going to start by talking about some other techniques that you can use to visualize data in interesting ways to kind of set the stage. And there's just a lot of different ways that we can visualize data in Power BI. And so I'm going to try to kind of break that down for you. All right, please silence your cell phones. You've seen this before. And if you are not already immersed in all the great stuff that PASS has to offer, then please go check that out. There are virtual chapters that you can attend just from your office chair or at home. And if you're not attending a local user group or attending a SQL Saturday, do that and volunteer. Go speak, help organize, do whatever it is that you do to help build the community. We are all about community, and if you don't have a lot of history with the data platform community, you're missing something. We've got something pretty special here, and I would encourage you to take some time to experience what the rest of us are so enthused and excited about. All right, so me real quick, I've been a member of the Microsoft MVP program for going on 11 years now, and just because I'm just passionate about what I do. I like to share it with others. I find that I love kind of going deep and solving problems and then solving business problems. I think this is one reason that I love business intelligence so much, is that I experience the immediate impact of empowering business and empowering business users with data. That's something that I find particularly fulfilling about business intelligence and analytics, is that it changes business. It helps move business quickly. And I think that's why I've kind of gravitated to this in my career. You're welcome to reach out to me if you have questions. I can't promise you free support or free consulting, but I'm happy to answer questions and direct you to resources. I'm semi-active on LinkedIn, semi-active on Twitter, active enough that I typically see alerts and respond to them, and then I tweet occasionally. I'm most active on my blog, which is SQLServerBI.blog, and of course you'll be able to download these slides, which have been updated and they're available out there right now. And anyway, so please connect with me if you would like to. All right, so let's talk about Power BI visuals. What opportunities do we have to visualize information with in a visual way with Power BI? Well, as you know, and it's no secret that Power BI is a very visual tool. And there are a number of baked-in visuals. Now, if we kind of rewind and think about the history of the product that we now call Power BI, initially Project Crescent was kind of an outgrowth of the reporting services product team. That was created in Silverlight, which was the tool set that they really had available to them at the time, and they could develop rapidly in it. And that became DataView. Power Views, thank you. It's got to have a power in front of it. Became Power View, which is still available in Excel, but then Power BI kind of grew beyond that, and they went back and retooled. And using the Chromium browser and modern HTML5 and JavaScript, they built a brand new visual experience that's very modern And will work in different devices. It'll work on mobile devices and different browsers, et cetera. And in order to do that quickly, and Microsoft, a good 6 years ago, was a little behind the curve. And in order to fast track and do that quickly, they built some standard visuals in the product. And then they kind of stepped back and said, all right, how do we take this to the next level? And so Microsoft did what Microsoft has done before. They enlisted the community to get involved by providing a toolkit and an API and some documentation and some starting code so that people could create their own visuals, custom visuals. And so Microsoft, the product team actually built a few custom visuals. Remember, one of the first ones was the fish tank. It's like, well, what's the business case for that? It's cool. I've seen a lot of businesses use that, and people get excited about it. So, wow, I can see how the sales, regions are doing. They're competing. The most successful salespeople are swallowing the smaller salespeople, and that's all crazy. But that was a custom visual. But the thing is that the standard visuals are easy to use, and custom visuals not so much, unless you're a hardcore C# developer, you have experience with the .NET framework and using REST APIs. Custom visuals can take weeks, if not months, to develop. And we have a number of people at this conference who have done custom visual development. I have customers who have done custom visual development. I opened up a project and started playing with it. I quickly see that it would take a lot of time. Ran into a friend of mine the other day who was a .NET developer and not a Power BI guy so much, but he said, I have a customer who needed a visual experience that we couldn't produce with the standard visual. So I decided I'd go create a custom visual. And I spent about a month writing code, as in 160 hours, and I've got this custom visual, and it's working really well, and I'm really kind of proud of myself. And he goes, I haven't quite done the interaction thing yet, so when you click on things that it slices and filters, and I said, that's what it's all about. That's what Power BI is it's an interactive experience. So it takes a lot of time and a lot of work to get there. So enter a Microsoft research project. A couple years ago, they started, called Charticulator. Now, I've had some experience with Microsoft Research, and they're a pretty well-funded, well-staffed organization that they're really kind of charged with just coming up with innovative solutions. And they don't deliver products. It's not about delivering something that necessarily gets licensed and productized and monetized. It's all about just kind of blue sky, let's see what we can do kinds of things. And a lot of their efforts eventually make their way into supported products and licensed products, but not everything. For example, the Sandance visual, which is a Microsoft certified custom visual, grew out of an earlier Microsoft research project. Remember, Grant Paisley originally had kind of discovered this, and we went into Bellevue and we met with the team that was working on this early version of this thing. It's like, wow, that's cool. What are you going to do with it? And I'd say, I don't know, but it's cool, And so, things evolve when it makes sense and when there's business value and when customers are willing to pay for them. All right, so wait. Before I show you custom visuals, we interrupt this program for a special announcement. This is breaking news. I actually want to show you that there is another way that you can create a custom visual experience that will kind of lay the foundation for this discussion, and then we'll talk a little bit more about Charticulator. So, custom elements can be added using yet another technique, and that is by producing scalar vector graphics that you can generate in DAX. And so building out an SVG, a scalar vector graphic, which is part of the HTML5 specification, can be used to do some very, very interesting things. And so I'm going to show you a project, and it occurs to me that I've closed this little Power BI desktop file. It is a fairly small file, so it should open up here pretty quickly. So I needed to place some icons onto a page. And you can go save graphic files and just import those graphic files. But I wanted to make them interactive, and I wanted to be able to make them data-driven. And so I went out and I found some symbols in SVG format, scalar vector graphic format. The interesting thing about SVG graphics is that they're not raster graphics. It's not pixels. It's not a binary object. These things are described using points. They're shapes. They're polygons. And they can be made up of polygons, of points, rectangles, text boxes, all kinds of objects that are naturally supported in HTML. And so what I did is I went out and I grabbed the SVG content that was super easy to find. I get the edit queries button to work here. Hello. Well, this is awesome. Well, I did. I clicked here. Another program. All right. So I'm going to go over to PowerPoint, and then I'm going to go back to Power BI Desktop. Thank you so much, Oscar. Yeah, I've experienced that before, and I don't remember how I solved it. All right, and so this is what the definition of an SVG looks like. That's a data bar. You can, if you look in there, you can see what's going on. You've got a rectangle with a fill color, and it's got a height and a width. Pretty simple stuff. Now let's go down to that shield that we were looking at. Now that's a polygon, and so it has a path element. Oops, let's not zoom in too much. Wow, sorry. You make everybody dizzy, so you have to leave. And anyway, so you can just see that these are just points. It's just a shape. You're just saying, connect this dot to this dot. You can do it with rounded corners, or you can do it with edgy corners. And so, you've got a lot of flexibility there. And the way that I actually built this is I just used the enter data feature. So I'm not even importing this data. You could go stick these things in an Excel spreadsheet or a database if you wanted. But all I did is I just said enter data. That brought me here. I copied and pasted this stuff, and I put it right there. Now, Power BI actually requires a little more work than that. It requires that you put this description header in front of this. So what I did is I added a custom column. And if we go look at that step, and my purpose here is just to give you an idea about how this is done, not necessarily to take you through the whole process. But you always have to put this descriptor at the beginning that says this data is an image, it's an SVG type, it conforms to this XML schema, it's version 1 using this encoding method. And by then, here's the SVG content. And then Power BI will interpret that. And the visuals that can interpret SVG right now are tables and matrix visuals. So I just import that. And then I come over here to my column and I say, all right, my definition I'm going to say is an image URL. So I have to set the data category on the modeling tab in order to do that. Now, those are simple SVGs, and you can just see them here in this table. They just get rendered. So I could go make a measure. So I could say, I want to create a measure that is a spreadsheet symbol. And so if I drag and drop that measure onto a report page, it's going to figure out that, oh, okay, I'm going to create a table, and there it is. There's your spreadsheet symbol. All right, so that's a pretty easy way to get graphics onto a report in a way, and then you can line it up with data. So I could use some kind of conditional expression of some kind that says, I'm not happy with the built-in KPI icons, and so I'm going to do a thumbs up and a thumbs down. So you go find the SVGs for the, and then in your measure you say if my actual value is greater than my target, then that's a thumbs up, otherwise it's a thumbs down. So there's a lot of flexibility here. Well, my task, and this was in a project that I'm working on, is that in a matrix, I wanted to be able to do color-coded data bars. And we've got data bars in the conditional formatting feature for tables and matrices, but you can't dynamically change the colors. You can say, if it's a negative value, make it this color, typically red, and if it's positive value, then it's always going to be this color. But I wanted to say, if it's in a different category, if it's a forecast, I want to make it blue, and if it's a target, I want to make it purple, and if it's an actual, then I want to make it orange, or whatever. My example here has tremendous business value. You can see that I'm using Flintstones characters. And so up here I've got Barney, Betty, Fred, and Wilma. So what I've done is, and I'm not even actually reading the definition of the SVG, I'm just concatenating a whole bunch of text together. And it's not there, it's there. Now, I got so far with this, and then I got stuck because I don't have a lot of experience with SVGs. And so I created a basic data bar, and then I reached out to the community through a distribution lists that I participate in, and some of the MVPs and other experts in the community do this. And it was Darren Gosbell who came back. And I reached out to David Eversveld, who's done a lot of stuff with SVG, and Brian Grant was busy. And anyway, so Darren came back. Darren is the primary author and keeper of the DAX Studio code. Darren came back and he said, yeah, try this out. And he gave me a lot of this code. I tweaked it a bit, kind of customized it a little bit. This is what we came up with. So I'm just declaring this measure, and I'm just saying, all right, I need to, first of all, for the entire range, I need to get the minimum value for all those values. And then for the entire range, I need to get my maximum value. I need to make an adjustment for positive and negative numbers. That's all the stuff I'm doing in the max value. And the rest of it is math, okay? And yeah, I stayed up late at night kind of working that out and did a lot of trial and error until I kind of figured that out. And I figured that, I'll start the positive bar in the middle of the cell and I'll go to the right, and I'll start the negative bar in the middle of the cell and go back. And it doesn't work that way. You have to figure out where the left edge is, and so you do some math to figure all that out. But then down here, and I just have this switch statement where I say, okay, which Flintstone character is selected? So in the matrix, I'm just saying, which column am I in? So if it's Fred, it's going to be dark orange. If it's Wilma, it's going to be purple, etc. And then down here, all I'm doing, let me zoom back in. All I'm doing down here is I'm just concatenating strings together. That is it. And so, the mechanics of this thing are really simple, and you can do some really crazy stuff with SVGs. All right, so that's one method of doing fancy things with graphics, with Power BI. What's an SVG? It's XML-based vector image, two-dimensional graphics. It's a World Wide Web standard. It started in 1999, but it's evolved as a lot of web and web design standards have grown up. It's part of the HTML5 spec, and it's supported in any modern browser, such as Chromium with Power BI, Edge, etc. And you can create all kinds of crazy stuff. So I could do spark lines or filled charts like these. I could do stoplight indicators. I can do simple symbols like you saw. I can do gradient fills and things like that. And you can actually do more sophisticated stuff as well with SVGs. These were all SVG graphics before I clipped them and put them into PowerPoint. Okay, so I just did that. So I did my demo ahead of time, apparently. But now we resume for our regularly scheduled program. So what is Charticulator, and why would I want to use Charticulator? So it's a Microsoft research project. I first saw it about a year ago, and it's made by these really smart people. If you go look at the profiles of these folks on the Charticulator site, you'll notice that all three at the top have PhD at the end of their names. So these are academics. really smart people. They have a lot of experience with not only object-oriented program and web design, but JavaScript and data science. And so this is made by brainiacs. I've interacted with them a little bit, had some conversations as I've asked questions. And it's very apparent to me that these are folks that know what they're doing. It is open source, which means that if you would like to go put the Charticulator Designer on your own website, like my friends at Power BI Tips have done, you can do that. You just go get it out of GitHub and go enable it on your website. It'll take you a couple weeks, as Mike Carlo can tell you at Power BI Tips. You get all of the goodness of custom visuals without all of the work. And it's built on top of durable technologies and API architectures that already exist. So standard JavaScript libraries and APIs like TypeScript and D3. Okay, so any developers in the room, you know, JavaScript developers, people with that kind of background? Okay, one guy, and this guy maybe. All right. All right. Okay, but know that this is built on that foundation. It really is very standardized. What can you create with Charticulator? All kinds of crazy stuff. And you know, I'm going to show you the building blocks, and hopefully you can imagine how you can extend that to do some interesting things on your own. It's not just about making data sexy. I think that's the primary focus. But it really is about finding and delivering the right kind of visualization to tell your story and deliver a message. So we can do all this stuff: radial, linear, segmented, continuous, banding, you know, bubbles, repeated things. Who's ever wanted to do small multiples? You know, repeated charts in a table or a matrix. You can't do that in Power BI right now without using somebody else's custom visual. Charticulator's particularly good at doing that kind of thing. So some concepts in Charticulator, and these are borrowed from primarily the D3 JavaScript library. So I'm just showing you screenshots of some of the toolbars that I'm going to be using, but these are kind of the foundational things to pay attention to as you get started with Charticulator. So on the Marks menu, we introduced the concept of a glyph. Now I went searching for the definition of a glyph. Now I know that, you know, just in the English language, a glyph just means this picture graph thing. Think about, like, you know, cave drawings and that kind of thing. That's where the word came from. This is the textbook definition. It's a hieroglyphic character symbol or a pictograph. So it's a picture that expresses something. It's a picture that represents information. I went digging a little bit more, and I found that the glyph tag inside of the SVG definition is actually being deprecated, but it's still a concept that we promote. So glyphs contain marks. A mark is any visual thing, the smallest element that you can think of: a rectangle, a line, a circle, an oval, an image that you would use in an infographic. It's that smallest thing that you're going to stretch, fill, repeat, and that's kind of the building block, the basic brick that you're going to make your visual out of. On this menu, we have a number of different things, assorted things. We've got the data axis. You're going to see how the data axis is used to proportionally size things along a common axis. You've got embedded and repeated charts. So this is the thing that allows me to go build a chart and say, okay, if I have a data set that supports it now, I'm going to repeat that chart along a grouping, and then it'll get a filtered set of data. Much like we've done in reporting services, if you have that background. You know, things that, you know, I've been asking for in Power BI for a long time, but it's just hard to do within the Power BI design environment. Links, we'll explain what that is. It visually connects things together. Guides are important because when you plop your visual onto the canvas, you know, onto a report page, you want to be able to stretch it. You want to be able to resize it, and you want all of the shapes and the stuff in there to size proportionally, and guides allow you to tell it to do that. Otherwise, it doesn't naturally scale. And then the plot segment is actually what you put your glyphs into. That allows you to repeat data based on your glyph. And so you can have axes within the plot segment that the glyph gets repeated onto, and that'll be obvious when you see it done. And then we have this thing called scaffolds. And so as you're repeating data, are we going to repeat it horizontally, vertically, in a radial fashion, or on some kind of a custom shape? And so using scaffolds, you can essentially go pin these repeated glyphs within the plot segment framework. And so if you kind of think about the hierarchy of these things, you've got the scaffold. You've got the scaffold that it sits on top of that causes it to repeat visually. That's what the plot segment's job is to manage that repeating and grouping of data. And what we're repeating are the glyphs. So it's a combination of those concepts. Then you've got a bunch of other stuff that we typically have with charts, like legends and titles, etc. Nearly all of the properties and attributes of these objects can be bound to data. So, my good friend Brian Larson here, who's been writing reporting services books like I have for many, many years, we know that the magic of reporting services is that you use expressions to bind everything to, and then you can hide and show and change colors and things like that. And we have that kind of capability here that we're getting just a little bit in Power BI natively, but this tool is all about using data to drive dynamic characteristics and capabilities. So we're going to start with something simple. I've chosen an example. One, it was an actual business problem that I needed to solve. And secondly, it kind of shows off the building blocks of the process. And we're actually going to deal with some of the harder things to do in a very fundamental way. So we're going to create a 2-measure bar chart. Now, you might think this is a pretty simple thing to do in Power BI. I have 2 measures, and I want to have a bar chart that has 2 bars, and they need to be proportional to one another. And guess what? You can't do that in Power BI, at least not easily, not without being real tricky. So we're going to use all of these elements, and we're going to get started and do this. So I am going to jump over to my browser, and I'm just going to go back. We're going to go to charticulator.com. I'm going to try to zoom in just so you can see what I'm doing, but I'm not going to be real zoom happy because I don't want to make you dizzy. So just trust that we're going to charticulator.com. Now, yesterday I was sitting in a couple sessions. The internet connection was just absolutely horrible. So I'm just going to ask you not to stream Netflix during this session, or just don't suck up too much bandwidth. You're welcome to, use your phones and whatnot, but it looks like we're doing pretty well. But I was so nervous after watching a couple of sessions that didn't go real well because of connectivity issues yesterday that I went and recorded my demos just in case, but we're having a pretty good experience. So I think this podium's made out of wood, so we'll knock on that. All right, I'm going to launch Charticulator. Now, the first thing to know is that because this is a Microsoft research site, there is no guaranteed support for this product. I'm calling it a product, this project. Now, I've been in contact with the folks who created it, particularly Bangshin Lee, and she has kind of been the primary manager of this, and she has said, I assure you that it's not going away anytime soon. In fact, we don't expect it to go away, but we don't have specific plans, or at least Microsoft leadership have not told us that it's going to be integrated into a paid-for product. So, you had to give me the standard disclaimer. Yes, sir.
Quick question. So Microsoft Research is the main owners of the project?
The only owners of the project, yes.
They're the only ones. So, and they're planning on continuing to support it. How are they going to deal with glyphs being deprecated? Not that you might know. I'm just curious.
So the question is, what's the story for ongoing support? And the answer is, A, I don't know, and B, they're going to cross that bridge when they come to it. That's an open question, and it's a risk that we take when using I don't want to say unsupported products, but non-officially supported projects, which is a big part of the Microsoft ecosystem. What I can tell you, and I had a chat with Will Thompson and Kim Manis, who run the Power BI desktop team, and their answer was, we're really interested in this project. It's really cool. There's been a lot of interest and uptake, which, again, not an official answer, but kind of tells us that they're serious about keeping it around. And then when there are innovations or changes that would require updates, hopefully they'll get there. So I don't have a better answer for you than that. Yes, Grant.
The important part to mention, though, is if you create the visualization, that's fine, right?
Yes, so this is an important takeaway, that when you build a custom visual, you use it within Power BI, that custom visual will be supported. It will continue to work within your reports. That's a guarantee that we have from the product, the Power BI product team. There's a question over here.
Yeah, so how is this different from the D3 that they've added to Power BI? Because you can add D3 visualizations directly to Power BI.
Through custom visuals? This is a heck of a lot easier to use.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you be able to, I guess, the next question is, would you be able to take some of the code that you created through this and use it through that D3?
So the question is, would you be able to build something in Charticulator and then leverage that to build out your own proper custom visual, your own, with your own code? I'm going to say yes, and a very creative and energetic person would need to take that on. I will show you the code that it generates, which I think should answer your question. Do I know of anyone who's done it? No? I'm not going to take it on. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do is, after just getting to Charticulator, is I'm going to go to Power BI Desktop. Now, a key point here is that Charticulator is a web-based design tool that really just builds out a massive JSON file, JSON and XML, with a boatload of JavaScript and object definitions. Okay, it does not have the tabular engine behind it. It is not a data visualization tool in and of itself. And so the first thing that you have to provide for it is some development-ready data to work with in a CSV. So you need to export a data set out to a CSV. Now that's super easy to do here in desktop. So what I've done is I've just added some tables to a page here. And as I've worked with this tool, and I've created a bunch of custom visuals, I've just taken some data and I thought, okay, I'm going to create a radial chart, and I want to group by month and by category, and then visualize, a measure in a certain way. And so what does that data need to look like? Well, I need to have a category value of some kind that I can group on. I need to have my month names. I need to have a measure value. So I dump that into a table like this one that has 3 columns, and then I'm going to export that to a CSV. Now, given our really super example right here, super simple example, all I need is 2 measure values. So I've already put that onto another page, and I'm going to start with that. This is my method. I go put a table on a page, and then I export that out to a CSV file. Where's my Charticulator demos? And I have a folder, and you can see that I've done a bunch of these things, and I'm going to export that. I just did this, and I refreshed it, so there's no reason to overwrite that file. So I've got that file now. Let me just make sure I have that window open right there. And I'm going to go to Charticulator, and I'm going to drag and drop that 2 measures CSV right here into the web page. And so there you can see that I have a preview of that really simple data, and I'm done with that. All right, so this is the Charticulator Designer. I've got the glyph designer here. I have the plot segment designer up here. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to zoom out in the glyph designer. And so I need 2 data bars, and I want a little gap between them, and I need to use guides so that they will scale proportionally. I want to have labels to the left side of each of those bars, so I need some space for that. I want them on a common axis, And then I also want data labels on top of the bars themselves. So I want text boxes that float with the width of those bars. So given all of that information and the fact that I've done this about 30 times, I'm going to go quickly add some guides to set that up. And I'm not going to zoom in, but I'll show you what I do after I get it done. So I'm going to go over to the guides. I'm going to add a vertical guide. I'm just going to draw that along this axis. And if you go down here, I guess I will zoom in on that. And see here, if I go to the guide coordinator, I can say, well, how many lines do I want in that guide? I know from experience that I want 3 lines in that guide. And then that's going to look like this. You know what? I want that one to be 4 now that I think about it. Let's do 4. The other one, I want 3. I also want a guide along the horizontal axis, so I'll go grab that one. And I'm going to draw this one on the top so that I have room for my data axis on the bottom. This one I want to be 3. Okay, so you see the little gray lines in there. Now, don't confuse the guidelines with the original kind of crosshairs that I had when I started. And then I want a data axis. Now, I want my data axis to actually start at this guide right here. That's the vertical line I'm pointing to, all the way to the end, so I've got room for my bar labels. So I'm going to grab my data axis, and I'm going to draw this one right there. Okay. Now, there's a lot of stuff there, and it's not apparent. I need to remember that it's there for right now, and it'll be a little easier once I start putting stuff on here to see where things are. Now, I'm going to drag and drop both of my measures onto that data axis. When I do, it's going to put a little placeholder point on there. You see that it auto-scales by default, even though I don't want it to be auto-scaled. I want to start at 0. So I have that data axis object selected. And you see the little property sheet. This is kind of a la Visual Studio or most development tools that give you a tree view of all of your objects. And then you have all of the properties or attributes down here. So I'm going to change the auto range to start at 0, and I'll go up to 50,000. Now, I will tell you that this will auto-scale at both ends, but it won't auto-scale up to the top end, which is something I would really like to see it do. And so if I were creating a bar chart like this that I wanted to completely auto-scale and start at a 0 axis, I would always use a percentage measure, and then I would scale up to 100 because I can't get that top end to change. At least I haven't found a way to do that. Okay, so if we go back up, you can see what's going on now. I have these 2 points way off to the right. All right, let me go ahead and undock this now. I will zoom out to do that, and I will undock that container. A bug was introduced not long ago that doesn't put my zoom tools in the lower right-hand corner all the time, so I have to kind of move that around a little bit to get that to behave correctly. I don't know when that happened. It was working quite some time ago. There it is, right there. Okay, and then I'm going to get it to auto zoom. All right, so I'm going to draw a rectangle from here, and I'm going to go over until it snaps to that first placeholder. So you'll see a little orange line there. Okay, so what that does is that bound the width of that rectangle to this first measure value, the first field. And I'm going to draw another one. Now, I need to move quickly in the interest of time, so I'm going to kind of do this and then explain what I did. Then I'm going to attach some text. So if we choose text and I pin that right there, you'll see that the text is really small. I'm going to put all my text on here and then explain why I did it.
Well, can you turn off the guidelines for the overall canvas?
You could go hide them individually. Oh, the original crosshairs. I don't think so. That's a good question.
You just move it out of the way a second. Move the window out of the way. Is that the visual for the plot segment? Can you just turn the eye off that? Yeah.
No.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, we're trying to get. Well, I try, but I try to ignore your crap, but I can't. We're trying to get rid of all the guide noise, and I haven't found an effective way to do that yet. Okay, so let me go ahead and fill these two rectangles first. So we'll just go to the fill color of the first rectangle and make that this light blue. We'll go to this one and we'll make it a kind of a lilac, light purple. All right, and then I'm going to go to my text. You can see that text is really small. So the first thing that I want to do, let's zoom in on that, is I want to move that text. It's anchored to where that green dot is, but it's right justified. So that text is always going to float pretty close to the left side of that rectangle. So I'm just going to move that for now. Part of my problem is that I'm on this slanted podium, and so my mouse control is not as good as it normally is. All right. Yeah, I'm kind of struggling with grabbing that text box right now. There it is. Okay, I'm going to cooking show demo this and not take up a lot of time. But you can move the text anywhere you want, and we can, change the size of the text, and there's all kinds of stuff that I can do there. Now, but one thing I do want to do, I'll at least, hey, I can move it now. I want to change the text size, and I want to show you the properties for one of these text boxes. I want to call them text boxes because I have a Visual Studio background, but I think they call them attributes. I'm going to pop that up to 24 points. You see that the text got larger. Now, if I drag and drop my measure, I'm calling it a measure, but it's just a field, and I want to make sure that that's on the right text here. Okay, so if I drag and drop my first field onto the text property, you can see that all of these are those values of an attribute. Well, anyway, whatever they are, these properties can be bound to data. If we put our text down here, you get this funny formatting string. Now this is per the D3 specification. And if you're interested in learning about D3, I actually have a link on the slide I'm going to show you. This took me a little while to figure out because it's not like a lot of Microsoft tools that I've used in the past. So the formatting here is a comma there to show that that's a 1,000 separator. You can see that it's a floating point data type. That's what the F is. And I've got 1 decimal point to the right of the decimal. So I'm going to change that so that it's 1,000 separator, fixed 2 decimal point. It's a floating point value. And then you can see that after I press enter, that number will get formatted that way. Okay, so if we took more time, I would go format everything the way that I want, place the text, make the text the right size. I don't want to run out of time. But what I do want to do is I want to grab the data axis, and I just want to make that invisible. I can use the little eye icon, or I can check the visible checkbox. So this is, even though it's not complete, it is a functional chart. And at this point, let me zoom out. We can now export this and make our custom visual. So to do that, the first thing that I would typically do is click the floppy disk to save this. Now it does save it online. The Power BI Tips implementation, they actually save to disk. This only saves online in the service. And I don't know exactly where it's saving it. It's just up there. And in the year that I've been playing with this, all my stuff is still there. So apparently I've got stuff saved up in the cloud somewhere. In Azure, somewhere, yes. Somewhere in the cloud. It's just up there in the cloud. All right, and then I'm going to export. And you can see that I can export to a bunch of different things. The only thing that I would, there is this Charticulator template that I could start with, but I want to create a custom visual. Now, so think about the reuse of this thing. I don't always want to use it with measures called quantity sum and quantity prior year. I could use it with any value. So I want to give my field wells a name in the Power BI Desktop Designer, and I'm just going to call them value 1 and value 2. All right, I don't want to auto scale. Everything else I can leave as is. So my, text 1, that was actually value 1 label. And text 2 is value 2 label. And all of the other properties I'll leave as is. Now, my visual, don't use spaces in these names. I found out the hard way that that doesn't work very well. So this will give you an idea of how many times I've tried to create just this visual. And so I'm going to call it 2 measure bar chart 19. All right, I can put my name there and take credit as the author. I can put my email address so that people can reach out and contact me. This is all metadata that gets put into the custom visual file. But that's sufficient for this to work. Now, I haven't finished this, and I do have a finished version, but what I would normally do now is I would click this button, and you can see that because I'm working in Chrome, that saves it to my downloads folder. If I were in Edge or IE, it would say, where do you want to save this? Now I'm going to pop back over to Power BI Desktop. So I've got my table on here, and I'm going to, just because I want to keep my table around, I'm going to convert this table into my custom visual. So I would go add a custom visual by clicking the ellipsis and say import from file. I probably don't want to keep these in my downloads folder. I'll go put them in a folder. But since I've done this, if we go import from file, you'll see my previous attempts. And this is one that is completely working, the number 17. I don't know where 18 went. Maybe I forgot about that. But I've already imported that earlier one. One thing that Charticulator doesn't do is it doesn't ask you for an icon. And so you can see that I just get all these, these icons. It is possible to go create a PNG file. And I've had limited success with this. I've tried unzipping the file, adding the icon file, and then zipping it back up, and that didn't work. And what I have found, and I haven't tested this thoroughly, is that for some reason WinRAR seems to maintain the format correctly. So if you go, buy a license for WinRAR, it'll cost you $30, I think. You can actually just drag and drop files into the archive, and it'll preserve that. Okay, so let's do the magic now. Now, you would think that as soon as I just convert that into my custom visual, that would work, but it doesn't because it needs a granularity. Now, this visual isn't grouped on anything. And so if I were designing this from scratch, I wouldn't have forced a user to group on something, but because Charticulator is kind of a general use tool, you have to group on something. You have to specify the granularity. Well, since I'm always filtering on calendar year, we're going to put calendar year in there. And I'll lose the big reveal if I am zoomed in. So I'll drag and drop, put that right there, and voila! We have a working custom visual. All right, awesome. Thank you so much. All right, now, if you go to the paint roller, you'll see that there's a Charticulator group, and you'll see all of those field wells and properties. Oh, look, there's Will Thompson doing Baby Shark right there. I'd forgotten I was showing that to somebody earlier today. I can go say, all right, this is quantity. I hadn't renamed my field wells when I did this earlier one. And here's prior year, quantity, even though I can't spell quantity. And, we can change the title, my cool title. All right. And, that it scales, it just does all the stuff that I would expect a visual to do. And so there, so it's magic. Believe it or not, that's really a lot of the hard stuff in a very simple example. Just kind of in review, a lot of this is based on D3. It utilizes some other JavaScript libraries, but most of it is based on D3. So in review, there's that formatting string. So this is the number of decimals, the data type. If you go to the D3 specification, which is on this slide. If you just download the slide deck, you can go to that GitHub repository and see the D3 documentation. So here's an example of essentially what I showed you, where that value gets formatted as with 1,000 separator and 2 decimals, regardless of the number of the values there. I thought that this one was interesting. S is the SI. I love that they call this a prefix, but it's actually a postfix with K, M, B, or whatever. All right, so what's inside a custom visual? So when you build one of these things, like other stuff in the Power BI world, and this is true in the Office world, is that all of these files are actually zip archives. And so if you were to just take your PBI viz file and postfix it with .zip, you'd be able to look inside it with Windows that naturally has zip built in, or you could actually extract it out if you'd like. And you just see that there are a few simple files in here. So let me show you what this actually looks like inside. So yeah, it's a lot of goo, but let's go back here. So this is the JS code file. And I'm not even going to zoom in on this because I don't want to show you real specific elements. I just want to show you that there's a lot of it. Okay, so you're seeing all kinds of JavaScript definitions, functions, variables, etc. And you can see that if you look at the scroll bar over on the right, that we're just getting started. All right, you do not want to hand code this stuff. All right, so let's go down to the bottom, and we're somewhere around 4,000 lines. And this was a polar chart, so it's not quite as simple as the one I created, but it's not a real super complicated one either. So back to the earlier question of could I use this as a starting point, I'm not quite sure how you would use this and how you would kind of use this as a springboard to build a custom visual. I did an earlier presentation, and somebody in the back of the room who did geospatial visualization said, can I use it to do mapping? And I said, nah, it's not built in, but maybe you could add your own shape maps or GIS related stuff. I think the takeaway there is that you're on your own. Okay, so imagine what you can do now. So I can build a bullet graph, per Stephen Few, and then I could repeat them. And I can do different regions, and I can do different kinds of markers, and I have all kinds of control. So there's a lot of possibilities, bless you. And now for something completely different. If you're old enough, you'll get that reference. All of these people are laughing. All right, so we're going to build a radial chart now. So we're going to build on some of the stuff that I've shown you. This is actually going to go pretty quickly. Because we've already done some of the harder stuff in that simple 2-bar chart. So some stuff to take note of here. My glyph is going to be a single rectangle. It's just a rectangle. I'm going to color it using data, and I'm going to change the height of the rectangle using data. And that's just going to be because it's bound to various data fields. So you can see that I have my measure down there, quantity sum, and my fill is going to be based on the product category. And then the x-axis is on month. Now we say, wait a second, there's no x-axis, that's a radial chart. What, x and y. We start out thinking 2-dimensionally, and then you change the scaffold. And so we started out with a column chart. Essentially, this is a stacked column chart that spins. And that stuff's really easy to do. So think about squares and rectangles first, and then you can start making them spiky and squares. So somebody who's done a lot of examples and demos is Nick. Why am when I'm on stage I can't remember names. Anyway, I'll credit him later. Nick Snap. And he created a cartoon dashboard, and he had a bunch of charts that were all spiky. He did a Spider-Man dashboard report, and he created essentially a radial chart that had spikes, and not something you can do with Power BI out of the box. And it was just super easy to do using something like this, but everything was spike-shaped. just by using triangles as his marks. So we're going to link these bands together. So you see the darker colored Bezier fills between, like if you just follow the red segments, you see that they're connected together, which just kind of gives you this visual flowing effect. That's what a link is. And then it's a radial scaffold, which I mentioned. So we're going to do that. I'm going to do that. You're going to watch me do that. All right, so I'm going to jump over to Charticulator again, and then I will just start. That's not Charticulator. We're going to jump over to Power BI Desktop, and then we're going to jump over to Charticulator. And I'm going to start over again. So we'll just say New. So I have the content of this table exported to a text file. Again, you see I have the names of months, I have category names, and I have a value there, my quantity. So I would export that out to a CSV again. And then we will drag and drop the monthly category quantity data.csv file. And again, we get a preview of that right here. Simple stuff. Now let's go dock my glyph editor. I'm not going to do a whole lot in the glyph editor, so I'm not going to worry about undocking it. So all I'm really going to do is just drag and drop a rectangle mark down into the glyph editor. Bam. Now you can see that because my data repeats, so if you think about, a row in that file is a month and a category and a quantity, we actually get an instance of the rectangle in the plot segment editor over on the right that represents every row in that file. So it's already visualizing data, even though it's not very sexy yet. I want to vary the height of this rectangle using quantity sum or whatever field I bind it to. I can do that in one of two ways. I can drag and drop this down into height. I can also just drag it into the glyph editor where you see height and width represented. When I let go of that, whoa, hey, look at that, I've got a column chart. All right, but we want to use colors to separate my categories. So again, I have my mark here in the glyph editor. You can see the fill property, so I'll drag and drop category name down into fill. And now by default, that's going to use a standard color palette. You can vary the color palette right here. And there are a bunch of different palettes that you can use. There's a standard Power BI palette. You can mix colors. So you've got all kinds of capabilities here. In the interest of keeping things simple, we'll stay with the defaults, but you have a lot of flexibility there. Well, that's great. So I've got this grouped column chart, but that's not what I was going for. I would like to actually arrange this so that we are stacking these rectangles on the y-axis. So here in the plot segment editor, if I just click, you get this little drop-down menu, and it does that, and that's because I haven't grouped anything on the x-axis. We'll put months down there, and nothing happened. And magic things happen. So this is a stacked column chart. So next time you see a stacked column chart, you can say, that's just a bunch of rectangles that are stacked on top of each other with a fill color. Well, that's really all a chart is. All right, so we're going to start kind of changing some properties. Now I can go down to the attributes editor and I can just change the actual properties, but we can do that visually. So I want to change the gap, make that a little bit wider. And now I'm going to add my links. Now let me zoom in to do this, just so you can see what I'm doing. So with one of the marks selected, I'm going to say I want to add links, which means that between the same kinds of mark, I want a visual connector from one instance of that to another. And you've got a couple different kinds of connectors. You've got lines and bands, and then there are variations of both. So I'm going to make that a banded link. And I need to bind this to the same field that shape represents, that mark represents. Then I'm going to create my link. Now, by default, that's just going to connect the dots and make these straight lines. Then if I go down here to the type, you can see that I can make that a line. It can be a Bezier curve, or it can be an arc. And I want it to be a Bezier curve, which means that it flows. And there's this property of a Bezier curve called the curvedness. I love that. And you can see that 30% curvedness looks like that, but maybe that's a little too much. So we can change that to 20. There's a little slider you can use, so that's a little more subtle. And I like the default colors there, so that works for me. Let's zoom out. All right. And if we really want to make an impression, we don't want to do colors over white. We want to do colors over black. So we'll change the back color of the plot segment, or the actual chart. If I can get down here. Now the problem with this is as soon as I make it black, now I've got black text over a black background, and now I need to go fish around and find the objects that I need, and that's why it's great that we have the property editor over here. So this property is actually, you have to fish for it a little bit. Let's see. I believe that these are properties of the plot segment. If you go to this link, no, I always forget. No.
You can just click on it in the chart though, presumably.
Right, but I'm looking for the black text that I can't see.
Yeah, so undo it and then click on it.
Well, I could, but that's not challenging. Is it the link? I've practiced this a million times. Or is it my I can't remember. We're gonna take Grant's advice here, and I'm gonna use Control Z to undo that, because I wanted to show you that you have multiple levels of undo. And so if I click on that text, no, see, I can't. Whatever. Is it the shape? Anyway, if I fished around in here enough, I would eventually find that both the tick marks and the text itself have properties.
It's not part of the glyph, it would be part of the...
Part of the chart or the plot segment.
It's the axis.
It's the axis.
Be part of the axis.
There isn't there isn't. So we don't have an axis scale here. I'm going to go back to the plot segment, and if wait, I just found it. So I just found it. It's this ellipsis next to. I don't know why it sits next to the visible property, but it's part of the x-axis category. So anyway, so it's that thing. Now that I've found that, I'll tell you what. Since we're there, I'm going to change them to white, and then we won't be able to see them. Yeah, then I won't be able to see them again. But then I know to change the background color. All right. So a key takeaway from this discussion is that you really need to get used to investing a lot of trial and error into this process. Thank you so much. Okay, now, so we've got this great, flowing column chart, but it's not the radial chart that I had imagined. So now all I really need to do is drag and drop my radial scaffold onto the chart, and then I can start changing some properties. So you can change the inner axis. The rest of this I really don't need to change. I could spin things around and change the spacing, but that's really what I was going for. Now I do have a title setting up here with black text on the black background, so we do need to fix that. Okay, and so we're done with that. So I would export it again, which you don't need me to do because I've done this before. So let's go back to the cooking show demo version. Yeah, you can add a legend. You can put it in different places, change the spacing, change the text size, etc. All right. So let's just take this table, and I'll go back and find my earlier. You can see all of my earlier versions of the 2-bar chart earlier. Okay, and again, data set's not complete. Now we do see that I'm grouped on month and category for the granularity. So You know, it did some default stuff there, but I need to add my category and my series again. So quantity sum got added to the series. Let me zoom in for this. And so I'm going to go to the month. Scroll down. So we'll add the month to my series. Hope that replaces that. Good. Now, and it will say that it's aggregating it, even though since I'm already grouping on month, first month just means month, because obviously the first month within the group of month is going to be that month. And then my category is going to be the product category in the product table. And then I need to go find my measure again. So that's up here. We'll do quantity sum, stick that in value, and didn't get the big reveal. All right, and then you can see that that's working. And I just wanted to point out that when you click on a rectangle, that it does do the cross-slicing. All right, so this is just being Power BI. There isn't a proper relationship in that direction, but it does do it in this way. Okay, so there you go. All right. Hold for applause. Oh yes, yeah. You can change the opacity. You have complete control over borders and styles and that kind of thing. Some resources for you. As I mentioned, and let me just visit some of these. We've got 8 minutes, and I will make sure we have time for some questions. This is a research paper that has been submitted to a number of industry groups by the research team who created this. And I think this is just yet more evidence of the serious investment into this tool. So I encourage you to take a look at that. So this is the implementation of Charticulator at the Power BI tips site. So this is Mike Carlo and Seth Bauer, a couple of MVPs in Minnesota, right? Have created this site. They've got a lot of good stuff out here. And they made some tweaks, but generally speaking, it's going to be exactly the same experience. Let's see. And then Nick Snap. So this is the gentleman that I mentioned earlier. Has done a lot of really cool stuff. Nick has probably done more examples than anyone else. Unfortunately, because Microsoft Research is kind of bound by the rules of the legalese at Microsoft, they can only share so much. And so they don't provide downloadable examples on their site. They've got some YouTube videos, but they're not narrated. It's not, do all this with me and it'll work. It's just kind of a quick tour. So you have to watch it 7 times to be able to figure it out. Mike has done a really good job of narrating some tutorials and actually taking you through the entire process to create sand key diagrams and radial charts and some things like that. And all of this stuff from Nick, you can just click and download and get the actual visual. So good stuff there. And so these are the demos from Mike Carlo. And then Bongshin Lee she's done some YouTube videos, but it's really kind of a music bed behind the tutorial. And then Layla, I never try to pronounce Layla's last name, but Layla with Radicad has also done a couple of tutorials. So we have about 6 minutes left, which means we have a little bit of time for questions. Yes? Wait your turn. Yes, ma'am.
The custom visuals, does it work on other data sets that's similar?
Oh, absolutely. So this is an important question. I want to make sure that I'm clear about this. The question was, will the custom visual work against any other data set? Do the fields need to be the same? Absolutely, yes. So you create a custom visual that just groups data by anything and then visualizes anything. You bind that to whatever data set you want as long as you have data that supports the general design of your custom visual.
So I'm following that, because I work with a lot of PI data. As long as I generate a sample data set that kind of has the same data type for that CSV, because it looks like you need to first upload the CSV.
Sure.
It could be anything, right?
Like my Flintstones example?
Yeah, right? So
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be real data.
Right. So she works with PII, with sensitive data that has personally identifiable information. And no, you don't have to bind it to the production data that you're going to use.
Just the same shape.
Just the same shape. Yeah, just fields that will behave the same way. Yeah, Jonathan, did you have a question?
Okay, so I literally just talked about not doing this in my talk, but can I create a visual with dual axis?
With dual axis? Yes, you can. Yeah, you can use you can use multiple axes. Yes.
I'm going to force a correlation.
Yes. And actually, Mike has an example of a dual axis chart where you have two measures that have nothing to do with each other. So I could do a percentage alongside a linear number of some kind. So absolutely, you can have multiple
I wanted
axes.
to create Tyler Spigen's thing in Power BI. This spurious correlation.
Let me know when you get it done. I'd like to take a look at it. Yeah, you can do a lot of creative stuff here. Grant?
Just an observation. Obviously, you mentioned D3. Everyone here maybe not know what D3 is. It's probably worthwhile going to the site quickly and showing
Sure.
as examples to give people ideas of the sort of things that are possible with this.
Yeah, so if we go back to this slide, D3 is probably one of the more recognized mature JavaScript libraries.
And we'll go to the D3 website.
Actually, the documentation's,
I'll link to it.
yeah. I mean, the documentation's right here in the GitHub repo. It's very, very deep. And there's.
Sorry, what I'm trying to say is just go to the D3 website so people see the sort of things that can be created with the D3.
Yes. Yeah, you can create a lot of animations and things like that. I've got 2 minutes left, and there are other questions. What is it? D3.org.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's all I want, sorry.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Paul, type D3.org.
Yes. Well, thank you, Grant. No, it's not D3.org.
He's put in D3.
But, okay, we're going to search on D3, D2. I'm going to get R2, D2. Yeah, look, that worked well too. All right. Could be D3. Data-driven documents. D3js.org. There we go. Yeah. So.
Click on any one of those and show it.
Yeah. Look, you can make animated bubbles. Yeah.
That was the demo, thank you.
Yeah, and there are tons. This has been around for a long, long time. All right, are there other questions? Yes?
Yeah, on the two measures visual, the first one, can you show an example when you add something to granularity that does have multiple items?
If I'm understanding your question, to add granularity so you repeat it. So what I would need to do, that visual itself is not equipped to be a small multiple yet. What I would need to do is save that as a chart. Then I would create another chart that might just be, a grid that is grouped by something, and then I would add that as an embedded chart that then gets repeated. So it's a fairly simple thing to do, but it's not something I can throw together quickly. So yeah, you can embed these things, and that's how we do small multiples and repeated charts. Way cool stuff. Let me make sure that I close out properly before we do run out of time. And ooh, what just happened? Let me do that. And that, and we're there. And make sure that you do your session evaluations. I always appreciate the feedback. And thank you so much.